Does BYU have a gripe if they do not get into the playoff along with Texas Tech?
Locked On presents The Portal, the daily podcast covering college football recruiting and everything NIL. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
To this crossover of Locked On the Portal and Locked On Oklahoma State. I am your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football recruiting analyst. Thank you for making both Locked On O State and Locked On the Portal a part of your day, each and every day, right here on the nation's #1 podcasting network, Locked On. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if it hits, you can get $300 in bonus bets across the FanDuel app. Just download the FanDuel app today. We're going to be talking about the Big 12's future. It is very broad on what direction this can go. Teams like Kansas State, teams like Iowa State, after they lose Avery Johnson, after they lose Rocco Becht, will some of these teams really invest NIL to try to stay at the top? Or is Texas Tech, BYU, and a few other schools, are they going to run away with this thing? Also, speaking of run away, Oklahoma State has went in the wrong direction, but now they're about to get what it looks like to be a very good coach. We'll talk about that during the show. Are teams like Oklahoma State going to rise back up because they want to be a part of the playoff picture too? And which teams aren't going to spend? Like even Arizona's had a pretty good year this year. The Big 12 is wild. But we're going to start with something that I think a lot of people have been talking about. It's pretty obvious Texas Tech, barring something very unforeseen, is going to make the playoff. But what about BYU? If they lose to Tech in the Big 12 title game, do they have a legitimate argument to go to the college football playoff? To help me figure that out, Cody Stovall, Locked On Oklahoma State. Look, you're a Big 12 guy, and you look at things a little differently than I do about the league, and that's fine. But like BYU's hard to grasp. They got a true freshman quarterback who has way exceeded expectations. I think I'm being kind. Needless to say, it's a great story, by the way, Bachmar. It really is a great story.
Yeah.
And their defense is solid, etc. But in their one really big contest that everybody wanted to see what they could do against a really good line, they got bounced against Tech. They did outplay Utah. They came back and won. And I think Utah's a better team than them, but Utah didn't win that day. So that's bottom line. So those are the three best teams, I think, in the league. Tech is, I think, definitively the best. They had the bad game against Arizona State, but their quarterback was hurt, blah, blah, blah. I think they'd have won that game if they had their starting quarterback the whole time, but I digress. But they're in, barring something unforeseen. Give me your pitch from a BYU perspective. If they, let's say they get beat 28-7 in the title game, something similar to what they did in the regular season, why should they be in the college football playoff?
It does almost feel like that they're going to get left on the outside looking in once again, just like last year. I think what the final CFP ranking, they ended up 13th, so they were right outside.
Yeah, they were.
Right? It does feel like that's going to happen to them once again. It's almost like they need to beat Texas Tech, because I'm with you. Texas Tech seems solidly in no matter what happens. Even if they were to lose the Big 12 title game, they're still in. And that may be the best scenario for the Big 12, is that BYU beat Texas Tech in the Big 12 title game, so that way we get two teams in, so that way we don't have to have this conversation. But as it pertains to the current rankings, yeah, they're number 11, but there is going to be a G5 recipient that's going to get in there and probably knock somebody out. If you're talking about a comparison, it may not be super comparable to maybe in Alabama because of the SEC, especially, the size of the schedule that Alabama does play. But Notre Dame, it's kind of egregious, man. They're the only team in America to start the season 0-2 and remain in the top 25 because they have a fancy helmet sticker. And let's be realistic. Notre Dame could be independent forever because their schedule was always one of the toughest. Now that some of the teams that they play on a regular basis, they're not the same. USC is not the same gargantuan team that they used to be. And I do think that the Big 12 is more competitive on a week-to-week basis. BYU has more wins than Notre Dame. They have less losses than Notre Dame. And their strength of schedule is ranked 6th. Notre Dame's strength of schedule is ranked 12th. That is supposed to be a metric that is utilized more so than ever in this final round of CFP. We'll see if they stick to their guns. If they do, BYU would get in, even if they were to lose in the Big 12 title game. But I'm with you. I don't think that it's going to happen. When we talk about rankings at the beginning of the season, meaning nothing, this is where I push back, because Notre Dame started the season, number 3 in America, number 4, something to that effect.
They were up there.
0-2 and still in the top 20. So it was always designed for Notre Dame. As long as they won 9 or 10 games, they were probably going to get in just because they started the season as a top 5 ball club. And for whatever reason, they're still viewed in that lens. I don't get it. I understand Jeremiah Love is a good story. Maybe that's part of it. Arizona State last year had Cam Scadaboo. So that was something the committee was definitely probably going to pay attention to. BYU, under their Buckmeyer, doesn't necessarily have that big, flashy, fancy story. And I think that's part of it. Jeremiah Love's up for the Heisman. Nobody on BYU's roster is. Therefore, they're automatically downgraded.
I think the eye test, I get your argument with BYU. I don't have any problem with it per se. Notre Dame's more spectacular, and Love is a part of that. And I think on a neutral field, Vegas would strongly favor Notre Dame. I'm not sure. Have they announced, speaking of the committee, like their percentages for their categories? Because I still think about half of it's eye tests. Now, I think that's why they haven't announced.
They did whenever they came out with the first ranking. So a couple weeks ago, they kind of insinuated that strength of schedule was going to be factored in more this year than ever previously. And it did appear that way from the first ranking. But here we are 2 rankings later, and it kind of feels like they've kind of pushed some of that to the side. Because I think Ole Miss, great story, but from a strength of schedule perspective, they're not super high, right?
It's the worst schedule in the SEC, technically.
So if you're talking about some of these metrics that are supposed to be implemented and that are supposed to matter, then Notre Dame and Ole Miss would be viewed less than a BYU. So it'll be interesting to see if they actually do utilize that, because if they do, BYU should be in. I do got to give credit to the CFP. They've given more respect to the Big 12 this year than previous years. But at the same point in time, some of the negative connotations around the Big 12 is always going to be this way until we can do something about it. So if it's only Texas Tech that gets in this year, they have to go play for a natty darn near for the Big 12 to get the amount of credit that we feel like we deserve.
I would push back on that because I don't think a lot of people view Tech as a normal Big 12 school because of how their NIL works. I think they look at them differently. I could be wrong on that, but like their D-line it's Georgia. It's better than Georgia's.
Yeah, there does seem to be this talk that they're separate from the Big 12. And it's kind of funny because, remember, it's the same conversation about Utah. When Utah's good, it's always, well, they're going to go to the Big 10. Now, there's never been talk of Texas Tech going to the SEC, but now all of a sudden, SEC fans are complaining about how Texas Tech is the only school in the Big 12 that's on their level, this, and that, and the other. That's yet another reason I want to see 2 teams from the Big 12 get in. I don't care if it's BYU, Utah, because I do think that the Big 12 is undervalued on a pretty significant basis, and people completely bypass the fact that the scheduling in the Big 12 is the most difficult because you have to bring your lunch pail every single week. You mentioned Texas Tech's loss. It was to the former Big 12 champion in Arizona State, which, by the way, is still a very good borderline 10-win ball club as we sit here right now. So that's not a bad loss, but they did it with their backup quarterback, and that's not being taken in consideration enough, in my opinion, because Notre Dame has a fancier helmet, and Lane Kiffin did a bunch of bitching and moaning about not getting in last year. So I feel like there is going to be a little bit of a narrative that the Big 12 doesn't deserve 2 teams in. And until we prove that we do and do something with it, it's always going to be that way.
Yeah, that's a really good point. When we come back, we're going to talk about something that is near and dear to Cody's heart, and that is the future of the Oklahoma State Cowboys. That is next on this crossover Locked On Oak State and the Portal. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get into the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making a late push. To that end, you don't have to do just games. You could do basic stuff like who wins a division, who goes to the NBA playoffs, who makes conference finals. There's all kinds of different things that you can do with FanDuel. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Head to FanDuel.com, sign up, and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you once again for making Locked On Oklahoma State and Locked On the Portal a part of your day each and every day right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Please become an everydayer and subscribe to each of our podcasts. Cody, Oklahoma State. I'm just going to be honest right up front, then you can take over. I refuse to watch your Cowboys until they change coaches. I cannot watch them. It is hard. So with that, please give me some good news on something changing and something getting better in Stillwater.
Well, there does seem to be a lot of rumblings in Stillwater over the last 20 or so hours in regards to Eric Morris, the North Texas head coach. If it is true that he's going to be the next man at Oklahoma State, I think that's absolutely remarkable, A, for recruiting, because he's already in his geographical footprint. He's been able to excel very, substantially at North Texas. This is the same dude who found Cam Ward. He's the same dude who helped recruit John Mateer. This is the same dude that found Messmaker, who wasn't even a starter in high school. And now some people are talking about him mechanically being an NFL kind of dude. And he's only a redshirt freshman. So I think that would be huge. Former Oklahoma State defensive line coach Greg Richmond is also at North Texas, a kid that I used to coach as a defensive end at North Texas. So I'm personally excited for a lot of reasons if this were to be true. Another one of these conversations about Eric Morris that isn't exactly the same as a Colin Klein is Colin Klein is going to leave for K-State, right? Whenever he gets the job. It's 5 years, 3 years, 6 years, 7 years. Nobody really knows. But it does seem like a foregone conclusion that Colin Klein will eventually end up at K-State. Eric Morris is a little bit different. What they have rocking right now with Joey McGuire, Texas Tech, doesn't really feel like Eric Morris is in jeopardy of leaving anytime soon if he were to take the Oklahoma State job. Former Mike Leach, wide receiver, so he comes from that kind of Hal Mummy style of tree offensively. They're number 2 in the country in offense. They're number 1 in the country, I think, in total scoring. The defense has enough players to make some things interesting. And another big thing is Eric Morris, G.J. Kinney, Alex Golesh. These are all guys that have recruiting ties to some of the players on the roster right now. I mean, you got to think about it. Just geographically speaking, probably 45% of Oklahoma State's roster had offers from North Texas and Texas State before they came to Oklahoma State, right? And a lot of players in the locker room discuss, if North Texas was bigger, I would have went there. If Texas State was bigger, I would have went there. So I think that it fits in a ton of ways for Oklahoma State. It doesn't come with the red flag that Colin Klein does of, well, if they don't like what Chris Kleiman's doing in 2 years, then you run the risk of losing your head man. And I do think that that is something that Chad Weiberg wanted to avoid. It didn't have to be a legacy guy, right? Zach Robinson would have been a comfortable option as the legacy dude. But Chad Weiberg seemed to be very clear. He wanted somebody that's already ran a program in this NIL era, because it's not only important that you know how to navigate that, right? But it's also important that you bring a decent chunk of dudes with you. If you look at Willie Fritz, he brought a chunk of guys from Tulane with him to Houston, and now they're massively successful. I think if you look at what, when Will Stein went over to Oregon, he brought some dudes with him. That's kind of the new thing, right? If you get a job, it's not necessarily about how great of a coach you are. It's also about what can you bring with you. Because in the world of transfer portals, if you know you're going to have to fulfill 40 roster spots already, you're going to want some semblance of security. And I think that's what Eric Morris provides. You've got a redshirt freshman quarterback that seemingly has already said he's going to go with Eric Morris wherever Eric Morris goes. So if Eric Morris comes to Oklahoma State, we're done with our quarterback concerns, buddy. And that has been one of the biggest difficulties on this season, is the quarterback play has just not been up to the standards in Stillwater. The only position that really has been up to the standards for the most part is running back. And even that, Rodney Fields has missed like 6 games. If you give Eric Morris's offense with some of the ability in Stillwater, speaking of NIL, we just spent like $13 million. So we can spend the money. It's just a matter of spending it on the right dudes, because clearly having the money to spend, it doesn't matter if you spend it on the wrong guys like we did this season. It's very visible. At this point in time in the year, Brian, you're seeing Oklahoma State competitive for 3 quarters, right? It takes 4 to win. I get that. But a month ago, we weren't competitive for half a quarter. And we were playing all of the big $25,000 a month dudes. Now we're playing a bunch of former walk-ons, third-string guys that are barely making $6-7 grand a month. And ironically, they're the best players on the flipping football field. So you have to be able to merge guys who give a crap with the finances to go alongside of it. We have the money. We just didn't identify the right dudes this year.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it, man. Culture and fit. It's not the same at every school. And that's why college football, to me, is better than the NFL because, like, look, if the Vikings are the team you grew up rooting against because you were a Packers fan, but when it's your time to be an NFL player and they offer 10 more million, go Vikes. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of the way it is a little bit in college, but college kids don't handle that as well as pro players. That's why they're pro players.
For sure.
So, you know,
yeah, and I would say that there's a lot more distractions in college to navigate.
Oh, yeah. The women, the night scene and all that stuff at that age is just not normal. It's just not. So to that end, let's talk a little bit about Dave Aranda. This is puzzling to me. Now, what I'm about to say is off the charts ridiculous, but it just feels this way. It feels like it's year 29 for Dave Aranda. I know it's nowhere near that, but every year he's on the hot seat and they announce that he's coming back. Two things. Number one, they are awful, not bad, awful on defense, yet he's a defensive coach. That's not good. Secondarily, they don't have a good quarterback, Cody. They have an NFL quarterback, and they have a 5-6 record. Why are the Bears bringing back Dave Aranda? Let's hear your take on this.
Brad, that might be the question of the month, and it doesn't make sense. It almost feels like Baylor's trying to reinvent the wheel in the opposite way. Right now, the trend is you fire your coach early so you can get started on the hiring process early so that you can kind of make those inroads before everybody else, right? I think Baylor's going the opposite direction. Everybody's firing everybody, and everybody's competing for the same coaches, so we're going to do the exact opposite, and we're going to try to, squeeze a square peg into a round hole. Because you're right, David Aranda being a defensive-minded dude, to watch that defense perform, it's pretty sad to see. And they've got talent. It's not a roster devoid of talent. Schematically, there seems to be some issues. I can only correlate it to some degree to Oklahoma State. And it almost feels like the buy-in from Oklahoma State players last year is to some degree what Baylor's getting this year. Don't get it wrong. Baylor's way better than we are. All right. They're way better than we were last year. But you are seeing some players seemingly out of position when they shouldn't be, and they're not exactly fighting to get back into the play anymore. And that's typically not a good sign. And another thing not mentioned enough is every time Aranda's on the hot seat, what does he do? He fires all the coordinators, and he overhauls the entire staff, and then he has to do it again 2 years later. Baylor, eventually you feel like you got a pinpoint on if you have to fire your staff every other year, maybe the common correlation here is it's you. But I don't know. Baylor's trying to go against the grain and do the exact opposite of everybody else. And I do kind of get it in the sense of, everybody in the country, we're all competing for Eric Morris and Alex Golesh and John Summerall, right? So, there's only so many good coaches to go around that. But the fun part is, GJ Kinney supposedly has always fancied himself as a Baylor dude. So if they were to offer the job to GJ Kinney, he would probably take it, and they would probably be in a better position, but they seem to think otherwise.
They're allowing 32.7 points per game. Cody,
and we're not even doing that, Brian.
I mean, you guys are playing freaking walk-ons. What does that tell you over there, Cody? What's going on, man? Okay. That's sad. When we come back, I want to broaden the spectrum a little bit. Talk about the Big 12 from a whole. Obviously, Tech is spending. There's a few others, but what does the league have to do to go back to what Cody's point was earlier, to get respect, to get teams in the playoff? Is it spending? Is it coaching? Is it something else? That is next on this crossover, Locked On the Portal and Locked On Oklahoma State. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. College football has been as wacky and as exciting as it's ever been this year. Couldn't be more excited about the finish with all the playoff games coming up, and we got the big rivalry games, tailgates, rivalries, energy in the stands. There's nothing like it. But let's be real, actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the actual games themselves. Endless queues, hidden fees, and prices jumping out at you at the end of your checkout. That's why I use Gametime, and I actually just bought a couple of tickets on that app because it gives the advantage back to me and you, the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you get. I was on the app for 5 minutes and did all of the following. I'm an Indiana grad. I wanted basketball tickets. I got in, found the game I wanted against Louisville, found the seats, saw my seat view on my phone. You could see the center court. And then I got the price, same one, the beginning and the end. And I was out, even though I had to put in my credit card information in 5 minutes. Take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets or basketball with Gametime. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download the Gametime app today. All right, Cody. I'm just going to get the easy one out of the way. Texas Tech has figured out NIL. Next. Now, everybody else that's trying to compete, who do you think is in that next tier? BYU is for sure.
Yep.
Baylor should be, because they got money. Are they spending it, though? I'm a little fuzzy. Is that a fair assessment for me to be fuzzy on that? Or
yeah, no, it is. Baylor and TCU don't have to publicly disclose all of their finances, so you don't really know exactly what is going on. I don't know what Dave Aranda's buyout is, but I would assume that if Baylor had big swing and D money, they'd be using it on a new coach right now. So perhaps things aren't quite as rosy in Waco. But yeah, BYU is definitely that next in line. After that, it's kind of a hodgepodge, but I do think that you would have to kind of put Oklahoma State up in that category. UCF has an alumni base that is likely willing to spend. Houston went from spending $2.4 million in NIL last year to like 10 this year. I think that's pretty common. You're going to see a lot of schools in the Big 12 kind of hover between that, 12 and 25-ish mil range. I don't think anybody's going to creep up quite to Texas Tech level, but BYU probably could. I mean, heck, you look at what they paid for their basketball roster. They've clearly got more money they probably have more money than Texas Tech. It's just always been a thing that tithing is more important than giving back to your university. So it's going to have to take some individuals that feel like tithing and also, pitching in. But I do think that, football is the front porch to athletics. That's something Mike Gundy always said that I definitely did buy into. So I think that you're going to see a lot of Big 12 teams spend a lot right now because it does feel like there's kind of this window. And you mentioned Cody Campbell at Texas Tech. He said verbatim over the summer, we don't know if there's going to be, another year of this in between realm. So he rallied everybody to spend a ton of money because they don't know if they're going to be able to keep spending $30 million a year. And I think Oklahoma State and everybody else is going to fall into that line. Where it does get interesting is like Iowa State, right? Obviously, Matt Campbell is going to be a popular name for Arkansas, LSU, multitude of other places. And he doesn't seem like somebody who would leave. He's had bigger opportunities to leave in the past. But their AD has been very vocal about they're in some financial issues right now. And so if you're somebody like Matt Campbell, if you're looking at the future of NIL investment in Ames, Iowa, maybe that is something that you pay attention to. And lastly, you mentioned, what should the Big 12 do to kind of get on a higher pedestal? I think that we need to go back to more recruiting high school. Like,
couldn't agree more.
Being transfer heavy, it can work, but 90% of the time it doesn't, right? So you have to be part of that rare 10% club to get a roster of 55 NIL dudes to work. That experiment seemingly has failed, and I think we need to take the NIL money that we're getting and invest it into the young dudes and say, hey, stay here for 4 years for X, Y, and Z. And that way you can utilize the transfer portal as, plug and play players. But when you have to completely lean 100% on the portal, like an Oklahoma State, like a Colorado, unfortunately, I do think that you're seeing the result. Even Cincinnati last year, super portal heavy, not very good. They were able to retain a decent amount of their roster and plug and play a few dudes here and there. And magically they're an 8-win ball club. So I do think that Cincinnati is a team that kind of follows that model of, we're going to keep investing in the young dudes, the 17, 18-year-old guys, and hope that we invest so much that they stay for 4 years.
I think your point about a high school is something I need to expand. Thank you for bringing that up. Let's use Florida State from 2 years ago. Holy crap, did they hit? I mean, it can happen.
Yeah.
But what had happened in 2024 and 25 for Florida State, Cody? How did that go?
Right. Complete implosion.
I know because I cover Florida State. I run Locked On Seminoles for those that don't know. I'm not a Florida State guy as like my main team or whatever, but I follow them very closely and have my whole life. I was told the locker room was a problem. Johnny got this much, Timmy got this. Once and it's going on where you are right now.
Yep.
It's a problem.
Yeah,
It's
thankfully not anymore, but yeah, the first 6 weeks of the season.
Yeah, but you changed who you played because the idiot brigade was running the asylum.
Yep, correct.
How did that work? About 70-3 is about how it worked,
Yeah, bro.
Whatever it was. You can't have it. So I want to give a shout out to Tech. Now, I don't agree with everything they do because they're kind of buying roster, but they got a couple of D linemen in the 2027 class. If you're going to do it, go with the trenches. What do I always pick on with your league? You guys can't recruit D linemen to save your life.
Yeah.
It's just true. So there's like, screw it. We're getting all the bad press. We're just going to go out and get the best D lineman. They got the best kid from Georgia committed. Believe me, Kirby is not happy. I know that firsthand. Like this is from people that are around him. He's not happy about this. If Kirby's mad you're stealing somebody, that's a dude. So to that end, I'm going to go see that kid play on Friday, by the way, with Damian Guyton. I'm not missing that opportunity. And go see some of these kids play. You go and watch and see, okay, well, this is why Texas A&M, this is why Oklahoma, this is why they usually beat the teams that are now in the Big 12.
Yeah.
This is why it's trenches.
Right.
Oklahoma State, for the most part, let's just use your school, in the last 10, 15 years, I'm sure you could name me just at wide receiver, tight end, and running back, 10 guys that played in the NFL. Outside the number stuff, they're usually pretty good because they get Dallas kids. It's the best city in the country for skill guys.
Yeah.
I'll say, but they're not getting the linemen for that. It's not that Oak State's not trying. The linemen, for whatever reason, linemen go to a very linear, small group of schools. Oak State ain't one of them. So,
well, nobody in the Big 12 is, right?
Exactly.
And there's a perception that's always kind of been that if you're a backup at Alabama, that's better than being a starter at an Oklahoma State, right? And that's always kind of been
starting matters.
But I think Texas Tech has hit a gold mine here because Jacob Rodriguez, he was a walk-on at Tech 5 years ago. Baron Morton had several opportunities to leave, but he stayed loyal to Texas Tech this entire time. Douglas has stayed there. They've got 3 or 4 offensive linemen that have stayed there. And then they went and got the plug-and-play dudes from Stanford, from Georgia, from, USC. They got those guys, but they had the culture dudes already laid the foundation.
If you're going to use the portal, use it at the end. 100% agree.
And that's what I wholeheartedly agree with Tech when people say they bought the roster. No, they didn't. They bought the right guy.
They finished with the portal. There's a difference. They got pass rushers, and they got Lee Hunter from UCF, who's 330 pounds. Mm-hmm. Good luck moving him. So, nobody can run the ball on them. They have the number 1 rush defense in the country. So those kids bought in, and the culture that Cody Stovall's talking about right here is the bottom line. If you didn't have culture, even Romello Height, David Bailey, and the big fella in the middle at 340, ain't gonna work. It ain't gonna work. Rodriguez is running around basically free to make and he's a very smart player, by the way. He's just
love that dude, bro.
He's so good. But at the same time, you got to have all the pieces because football is the ultimate team sport. They've done it. Now, I'm curious that next year they're going to lose a lot of those key.
Right.
It's going to be a lot harder, and they know that.
Yeah.
But that's why they're going in high school. They may take a year, they take a step back.
Mm-hmm.
But if you hit the high school 2 years, then it snowballs.
Well, and if you have the right foundation, you have the right culture.
Right.
A down season is 7 wins. As Oklahoma State, we got to experience this for 18 years. A bad year was 7 or 8 wins. That was a bad year. That 8+ became the expectation. I think Texas Tech is getting to that point. And again, I think that they do have that foundation, that have that culture to allow the NIL portion to be successful because Texas Tech, the guys like Jacob Rodriguez and Baron Morton, they run that locker room, right? So if you're one of those Tom, Dick, and Harrys that is more about money and less about Lubbock, they're going to voice their opinion and you're not going to play. Unfortunately, that wasn't happening in Stillwater. The coaches were told who was going to play, and that's who played. And it was an absolute disaster.
Yeah, I don't even want to talk about that. That makes me want to hurl. So I'm looking forward to having a crossover with you just on Oak State when they hire their new staff, like when that's done. We got that stuff coming. But Cody, thank you very much. This has been educational. It's been fun. Tell everybody where they can find your work.
Yeah, just come check out the show, Locked On Oklahoma State. You can find me on X at All Day O State. It's O State All Day on the other social media sites. And feel free as we dive more into this fun coaching carousel search that finally feels like it's come to a close.
Yeah, well, hopefully there's a bunch of that. I think it starts with Kiffin's announcement on Saturday, and then it's just going to go bonkers. So Auburn, Oklahoma State, and a whole bunch of people are going to be getting coaches. But by the way, somebody's going to be very mad because Kiffin could only go one place. That's going to be entertaining. I'm looking very much forward to that. So,
yeah.
Cody Stovall, I am Brian Smith. Everybody have a good one. Take care.